Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, tensions along Israel's northern front flared up late last night when a Syrian militant cell was spotted planting explosive devices near the Israeli security barrier. Palestinian Islamists launch a rocket from the Gaza Strip toward Israel's southern communities, prompting an Israeli retaliatory response against Hamas installations. Approximately 10,000 Israelis demonstrated in front of Prime Minister Beniamin Netanyahu's residence over the weekend over the government's perceived failure to deal with the corona crisis. Tensions along Israel's northern front flared up late last night when an unidentified militant cell was spotted planting explosive devices near the Israeli security barrier of the internationally recognized armistice line with Syria. The IDF monitored the cell of 4 men who had crossed the so-called Bravo line into the southern part of the area of separation, which is intended to serve as a buffer zone between the two enemy states. Per a video released by the IDF spokesperson's unit, the cell, comprised of 4 individuals, approached the Israeli fence and planted what later was corroborated to be explosive devices before attempting to flee back into Syrian territory. However, an IDF Special Forces unit called Maglan prepared an ambush upon the cell's attempted departure. In a coordinated attack by the Israeli elite ground force and an Air Force aircraft, the unidentified Syrian cell sustained a direct hit. And while none of the militants survived, no injuries or damage were reported among the Israeli troops. Meanwhile, the IDF spokesperson's unit stated that the affiliation of the militants remains unknown, although it is documented that there are elements working for Iranian interests in the area. Nevertheless, the Israeli military reiterated that it holds the Syrian regime in Damascus responsible for all events on Syrian soil and will not tolerate any violation of Israeli sovereignty. The IDF continues to maintain its highest level of alert along Israel's northern front on both the borders of Syria and Lebanon. Meanwhile, residents of northern Israel noted this morning that while they have heard of the incident last night, they make every effort to preserve their daily routine.
Last night there was some kind of an attempt to infiltrate the border, but as a personal feeling, I think we hear about it from far away and we try to put it away in our minds and just continue with our lives.
Turning now to the country's southern front, where Palestinian Islamists launched a rocket last night from the Gaza Strip toward Israel's southern communities. Rocket alert sirens were sounded throughout the civilian communities adjacent to the Hamas-controlled enclave, as well as in the city of Sderot, forcing residents to rush into bomb shelters within the Home Front Command's instructed time frame of 15 seconds. Thankfully, an Iron Dome surface-to-air battery successfully intercepted the inbound projectile, which evidently had a trajectory into a densely populated civilian area. And while no injuries were reported, a civilian vehicle sustained damage from the rocket's debris. In a retaliatory response, Israeli fighter aircraft targeted militant installations throughout the Gaza Strip, including a concrete manufacturing site used for underground infrastructure construction, as well as military subterranean facilities belonging to the Islamist Hamas organization. The IDF spokesperson's unit emphasized in a statement that it views any terror activity against Israel with great severity and will continue operating as necessary against attempts to harm Israeli civilians. It further highlighted that Hamas is held responsible for all events transpiring in the Gaza Strip and emanating from it, and that the internationally recognized Palestinian terror group will bear the consequences for terror activity against Israeli civilians. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, Israeli alternate Premier and Defense Minister Benny Gantz informed the Israeli leadership on the latest developments on the country's northern front. Speaking at the weekly cabinet meeting, Minister Gantz also seized the opportunity to once again warn the Lebanese-Iranian proxy Hezbollah and its leader, Syed Hassan Nasrallah, not to test Israel's resolve to defend itself.
אני מבקש לעדכן את השרים שאנחנו נמצאים בהיערכות מוגברת בצפון הארץ על מנת למנוע כל פגיעה בחיי אזרחים לכל הפרת ריבונות. אם נסראללה חושב שהוא יכול לחצות את הקווים האדומים, הוא יקבל תגובה כואבת שתזכיר לו את עליונותה הצבאית של מדינת ישראל, והוא יסכן את מדינת לבנון, שתישא באחריות לכל פעולה עוינת משטחה.
Alternate Premier Gantz further addressed the public unrest that has been plaguing the Jewish state over the past several weeks, including a demonstration that was held in front of the residence of Prime Minister Beniamin Netanyahu on Saturday night that included some 10,000 protesters. While the demonstrators called on the government to resign over claimed failure to deal with the corona crisis, Gantz urged his fellow ministers to project leadership by avoiding rhetoric that could be used to further exacerbate the situation.
אנחנו מצפים מהציבור לשמור על התנהלות ראויה ושמירה על הכללים, ולא פחות מכך לנהוג בכבוד הדדי בין קבוצות המפגינים עצמן. אני מבקש מכולנו, גם כאן, לא להקצין, לא לתקוף רק לשם התקפה. ההנהגה היא קודם כל דוגמה אישית שלנו ומה אנחנו משדרים לציבור.
As was the case in previous protests, toward the end of the demonstration on Saturday night, a relatively small group of people scuffled with enforcement authorities.
בממשלה אנחנו מחויבים להיות קשובים לאנשים. כשלטון מוטלת עלינו האחריות לאפשר את קיומן של ההפגנות ולהגן על המפגינים שלצערי גם אתמול הותקפו במספר מוקדים. זכות המחאה היא נשמת אפה של הדמוקרטיה והאלימות היא כרסום יסוד הדמוקרטיה. שוחחתי על הנושא הזה בשבוע שעבר עם השר אוחנה. אני שב וקורא לכולם להימנע מהאלימות ולמשטרת ישראל לפעול במינימום הכוח הנדרש תוך שמירה על החוק ועל שלום המפגינים.
It is important to highlight that in contrast to numerous media publications of widespread scuffles, the Israeli Police Zion District Commander, Assistant Commissioner Ofel Shomer, insists that only some 200 demonstrators turned violent out of the approximately 10,000 protesters that attended Saturday night's rally.
אפשר להגיד ש10,000 איש כמעט התנהגו בצורה מופתית, סיימו את המחאה שלהם ועזבו בצורה מסודרת הביתה. נשארו חלק קטן של מפגינים, ממש קומץ עד 200 איש שסרבו להתפנות. אפשרנו להם אחרי השעה 11 בלילה, אחרי 12 בלילה, כמעט עד השעה 2 אפשרנו את זה, קרזנו להם, הזהרנו, ובסופו של דבר נאלצנו להשתמש בכוח סביר כדי להדוף אותם ולפזר. יש כ10 עצורים.
In response to the reported violence, Prime Minister Beniamin Netanyahu released a rebuking statement against the rioters, writing, "Don't drag the country toward anarchy, violence, and attacks against the police." Nevertheless, the demonstrators are seemingly unimpressed by those words, vowing to return every week until Premier Netanyahu resigns his post.
Next week we're gonna do this all over again. Doesn't matter, a twisted ankle, a broken leg, or a broken head. I'm still gonna come here until Benjamin Netanyahu will go home.
Thank you for watching us. As part of TV7's initiative, I would like to encourage you to join myself and the team here in Jerusalem to lift up the residents of the Gaza Strip in prayer for their salvation and peace, alongside our ongoing prayers, of course, for the peace of Jerusalem, the salvation of Israel, as well as for all those who are impacted by the corona contagion worldwide. I'm Jonathan Hassan, have an Erev Tov and Shavua Tov, and we will see you again tomorrow at the same time.